Hi, welcome to another episode of Specialty Crop Corner with Brad Bergefurd. Brad Bergefurd is a horticulture specialist and an extension educator with the Ohio State University South Centers. Brad, I've been learning a great deal about hops. I know the last couple of sessions we talked about getting prepared and better understanding what hops are. But today we're going to be talking about the start of planting hops. Is that correct?
Yes, correct. We've introduced hops in previous sessions, the opportunities we have for our Ohio farmers, how we at the South Centers brought this crop back to Ohio almost 10 years ago now, and all the opportunities that exist for farmers to diversify in this crop. So, yeah, this is a very expensive crop, like we've talked about in the past. To grow an acre of corn or soybeans, to put in perspective, we might have $900 to $1,000 an acre invested in those planting costs. When we look at hops is a little different. It's a perennial crop, so it's not going to be an annual crop like corn and soybeans. We plant it, it could be there for 20, 30 years. And the cost to plant an acre of hops is quite a bit more, looking at about $25,000 an acre after you get everything said and done to plant an acre of hops. So there are some things we need to keep in mind when it comes to planting hops that will help our farmers and our growers be successful.
What is the normal size of planting? Is it an acre, 2 acres, 3 acres?
Very good question. Our Cooperative Development Center there at Piketon at South Centers, we worked together years ago to form an Ohio Hop Growers Guild, which acts like a cooperative, and they take actually statistics every year from their membership. So about 80% of the Ohio hop growers are members of that guild, and the average acreage is actually increasing every year, which is probably true to say with any new crop. People are going to start out small, and then they're going to slowly increase acres as they go. So I think with last year's statistics from 2019, our average Ohio hop grower is now just a tad over 2 acres. So previous to that, we were looking at half acre to acre, which is, we want folks to start out small because of the high investment with this crop and the big learning curve. We don't want folks to jump in with a 5, 10, 20 acre planting. We'd rather have them learn with that small acreage and then slowly ramp that acreage up. So like we said in previous sessions, Ohio could use, just from our Ohio breweries alone, they use about 6,000 acres of hops. And in Ohio, we're just a tad shy of 300 acres total. So we have quite a bit room for growth here in Ohio. So what we're going to talk about today then, Patrick, is some of the important things that are required to be a successful hop grower. I've worked with majority of the farmers that have diversified into hops here in Ohio, and I've learned a lot from working with those growers. Those growers have learned a lot. We learn from our experiences and our mistakes, and some of the things we're going to talk about today are mistakes that were made by previous growers when they were getting started growing hops. But we have our own hop research farm at Piketon, like I mentioned before. And we also have 2 other hop research yards up at Worcester and one at Bowling Green. So folks from around the state can actually visit those hop yards to actually see how we do it on our OSU hop farms. And this is what a typical hop yard looks like for those that may have not participated in our previous sessions, but they are a wide space crop, take up a lot of area, and have a pretty intensive infrastructure in order to trellis that crop. Because it does grow 20 feet tall, we need a lot of telephone poles with aircraft cable. And actually, Patrick, we're going to get into this in about 2 weeks, about what it takes to actually build a trellis. And Tom Harker, who is our research assistant down at Piketon, I may have him teach a session on building that trellis construction, because he's been the one that has built all of our trellises there at Piketon, and I'd like to have him share his expertise with our viewers on how to build an actual hop trellis. But those that maybe haven't seen what a hop plant looks like, this is down at the ground looking up 20 feet in the air, and It actually is a vine. It grows up a string, and those little green balls on there, those are the hop cones, and those what we'll be harvesting in about year 3 after we plant our planting of hops. So just to review a little bit, what are hops? Hops are what make beer. And that's what gives us its citrusy taste. It's all the other tastes that are part of a hop. The aroma of a beer all comes from the chemical properties within those hops. And the chemical properties are actually initiated from what's inside that plant called lupulin, which there's lupulin glands in there, and the lupulin actually contains all those different properties. And as you can see from this cross section of this hop cone, that's the lupulin glands with all the lupulin inside of it. So that's what we're after. And to properly produce a good crop of hops, you got to have that lupulin in good, healthy shape, and that all strings back to planting the hops the right way. And again, there's just another close-up of that lupulin within that hop cone.
And you mentioned that there are a number of different varieties of hops.
Yes, correct. Throughout the world, there's well over 100 varieties. We have just a tad over, right around 25 on tests between our 3 locations. So we definitely haven't grown them all. But our experience working with our growers and from our research, we can grow just about every variety here in Ohio. Some varieties will be dogs. They're not going to yield and produce near the yield that some other varieties will grow. But, you know, when you pick your variety, Patrick, it all depends on what your buyer wants, and that buyer is our brewer. So the brewer will determine what varieties that the grower is going to grow. And we're going to talk about planting today, but you can actually go to our website where we've done a picture gallery of when we planted our hop yard at Piketon, from the time the semi-truck pulled into the barnyard full of telephone poles till our first harvest was complete. So there's nothing better than seeing it in pictures, what it takes to grow a hop yard. So we mentioned this is how we ended last week. Some of the hop yard requirements, you need lots of space. Like I said, they're 20-foot tall plants. They grow to be monstrous, so they need lots of space. We need that infrastructure, that trellising, in order to support those hops and keep them growing up and growing tall, because the taller they grow, the more hops they make. Then we need all these poles and these trolley wires, which is just aircraft cable that we hang our plants and our string off of. We need coconut coir twine, which our Ohio Hop Growers Guild orders this from Sri Lanka every year in a big boatload. Literally a boat gets shipped over here, and the twine is on that boat. And so they buy that together, and that's the kind of twine we use, because that twine goes through the harvesters a lot better, which we'll talk about harvesting in a future session as well. And we've mentioned a little bit about irrigation. We'll go more in depth with that at a future session. But today we're going to talk about that fertile soil that's required, because these are a perennial crop. Once we plant this crop, it's hard to plow. Well, you really can't plow the field again and do any deep amending of the soils. So the soil nutrition and fertility starts way before planting. But these are just some of the other things that we're talking about, are requirements for to establish your hop yard and establish your hop planting. And again, we'll go over a lot of these over the next few weeks. But the first thing we want to talk about is this preparing the soil, preparing the ground. Because it's a perennial crop, and you know the root systems, Patrick, on these hop plants can go down 10, 15, sometimes 20 feet down and out. So it is a plant that feeds much deeper from down into the subsoil and the soil profile than our annual crops like corn and soybeans. So a little bit different here when we're testing the soil and doing that deep amending prior to planting. We probably want to go a little bit deeper than that 4 to 6 inch plow layer that you usually do for annual crops. We're going to probably do a 4 to 6, I do recommend a 4 to 6 inch soil test, and then maybe go down a little bit deeper, that 12 to 14 inch, getting into the subsoil, and do a test there as well. And then we can see what the nutrient compositions are of those 2 soil layers. And then before planting, we can go ahead and make some amendments. This is Wayne Lewis, our farm manager at Piketon, who, after we did those same tests at our hop yard at Piketon, he went ahead and spread the amendments that required some lime, phosphorus, potassium, and some minor elements are what we needed. And that varies by farm. So again, we don't want to guess, we want to soil test. So soil testing is the biggest, most important step when it comes to planting hops that a grower can do. And we'd like to see the soil test done, 6 months to a year in advance, because soil, we're dealing with Mother Nature when we're dealing with soil, and she doesn't change her composition very quickly. So in order to have that plant hit the ground running, we need to have that soil amended, and we need to have the pH adjusted and all those elements all in line. And sometimes that can take upwards to 6 months to a year for that soil to get back into shape and get back into sync where it's needed. If we plant that crop and the soil's not in sync yet and the pH isn't adjusted, we could actually lose, the plants, or we could actually lose quite a bit of that first year growth, which is very important to a hop plant, to get that extensive root system developed and get enough biomass there that the plant can take in the photosynthase required to build that root system. So when it comes to nutrient management, that's the number one most important thing I would say. I'd like to mention something else, Patrick, right now too. Look at what the previous crop was in that field. That's probably the second most important thing I've had issues with farmers is they went into a field that maybe had corn and soybeans in it, and some of the herbicides that corn and soybean farmers use can have a residual, a very long-term residual, sometimes up to 3 years. And because we're talking $25,000 an acre, I have seen farmers that made that mistake, planted into a field that had a previous corn crop in it the year before, and the herbicide carryover killed their plants. So that's a major, major financial loss. So I'm not going to go into that a lot, but just want to mention that. Watch what your crops were. Watch what herbicides are put on that up to 3 to 5 years before you plant your hop crop. But the big thing we're going to talk about today is just getting that ground prepped and getting that soil ready. And the reason it's more important with hops than even our annual corn and soybean crops is because of the perennial nature of that crop. It's going to be around for a very, very long time. There's 100-year-old hop yards in Germany. We don't have any that old in Ohio. But, you're going to get at least 20 years out of these hops. So you need to get that soil well built up prior to planting that crop. And if you don't get that proper nutrition management down, it's going to impact your yield, impact the chemical properties, the brewing characteristics of those hops, and ultimately the profits that you could generate and make from your hop planting. So again, I can't stress enough, don't guess, soil test. If you don't know, I don't know what counties, we cover a wide range with your programs, Patrick. So just to contact your county extension educator, and they can get you in touch with the local soil testing labs in your county that can actually get them soil tests done for you and be more close to home, because those labs are set up to conduct the laboratory analysis according to the soil types in that region. So again, just contact your county educator and find out a soil testing lab near you.
When you do a soil test, does it tell you the different components that you did? Like for instance, with corn, you had indicated that there might be residuals of herbicide, or determine if you have an overabundance of some kind of herbicide?
Very good question. And the soil test will just determine the nutrient properties of the soil. It does not give us the test results for herbicide carryover, disease pathogens, none of that. Just nutrients and the indication of the soil health at that time. So very good question, Patrick. But when it comes to our hop planting, we want to do a prescription fertilizer management. It's prescribed just for that hop crop on that farm, because every farm's is different, every field's different, and hops all require different, depending on where they're growing, a different prescription fertilizer program. So there's where, when you're planting hops, your soil test results and that pre-plant fertilizer application way before planting actually starts that prescription fertilizer program. So it's not something that you'd start this after the plants are in the ground. Our prescription fertilizer management program is started well before planting. And like I said, I'd like to see this all done 6 months to a year in advance. And then we'll talk about in future programs as well how important it is for the timely fertilizer applications. And then we're going to talk about this at a future session too, is the split nitrogen applications. The crop doesn't need much nitrogen pre-plant, but it needs a little bit to get that little baby plant off and going, but it does require split nitrogen applications within the season as that plant matures. So we'll talk a little bit more in depth about split nitrogen applications also, Patrick, in future programs. But we're just going to end the day's session here a little bit with a few more slides of how we did it at South Centers at Piketon. So you've seen the first picture there where Wayne Lewis, our farm manager, was amending our soil with different amendments like lime and phosphorus and potassium, some minor elements according to our soil test results. And then those amendments are all incorporated within that soil profile, either deep amended with a plow or a tillage tool, and then you see in this case where we're actually pulling those amendments after they've been broadcast on the field up into the bed. And this is a planting requirement on our farm and on most farms. Hops do not like wet feet, so we'll throw up a big, tall, raised bed in order to plant those crops on top of, and that incorporates the amendments into the bed. And then weed control is important. We don't have a lot of weed control options when it comes to herbicides on hops, especially for the planting year. So we, as well as many of our farmers, will utilize some type of a mulching material. So here you see our research crew putting down some landscape fabric. Landscape fabric is a little bit heavier duty. It's more of a porous material, allows the moisture to come through. And then we cover that bed with this landscape fabric, and we'll plant through it. And next week, we'll talk about how do you plant through that landscape fabric. So again, if you want to know more about all of our research results and some of the fact sheets that we have written, you can go to our website, southcenters.osu.edu/horticulture. And if you're interested in hops, you can always join our hops listserv. So you can contact me or just go to this website, go.osu.edu/hops listserv, and you can subscribe there. So hopefully this gets folks in the planting mode and understanding some of this pre-planting things that are required, Patrick. And next week, we're going to actually start sticking some plants in the ground. But do you have any questions?
If I'm a farmer that is used to farming all regular crops like corn, soybeans, do I need special farm equipment for the hops, or could I use what I have?
For the most part, you can use what you have, and that is your two hands. It is a very highly labor-intensive crop, and a majority of the tasks to grow hops are done with our hands. So, yeah, everybody should have their hands, and those will definitely come in handy. Now, I get what you're meaning, though. There are some specialized pieces of equipment like this picture I have up here of the plastic layer and the bed shaper. Our traditional hop or crop farmers, corn and soybean farmers, do not have this equipment to make the beds and to lay the landscape fabric. Like there's the bed shaper, and this is all one unit. So we use the bed shaper that's on the unit, and then we go ahead and do some adjustments to lay the plastic. So that would probably be the biggest thing. The other biggest thing we would need is as we get into spraying, which we'll talk about future programs on pest management, a traditional crop sprayer doesn't go 20 feet in the air. It's more just to the ground. So we're going to need some type of a sprayer to get the crops. And we've modified up at our Bowling Green yard. We modified our field crop sprayer to spray the 20-foot tall hops. But there's not a whole lot of equipment other than things like these, Patrick. But that's a very good question.
When someone is starting out growing hops, there has to be some kind of organization that fosters a better understanding of the hops. Are there some organizations in Ohio?
Yeah, and the one I mentioned previously that our Co-op Development Center there at Piketon helped form years ago, the Ohio Hop Growers Guild. That is a phenomenal group of hop farmers in Ohio. They share ideas. They buy their supplies together. I'm one guy, but in the Hop Growers Guild, we have about 100 farmers. So there's 100 people that anybody new looking to get into hops can talk to those folks. They have an educational program. They put on an annual conference. They have field days. I'll give a list next week of some of the upcoming educational programs that they have actually put together for the rest of this year. So no, I would suggest anybody interested in hops, go to ohgg.org. That's the Ohio Hop Growers Guild, ohgg.org. And that is the support group, the growers group, a phenomenal group of people that will help anybody interested in getting started in hops.
I know that when you have different training programs, you invite not only different farmers, you invite individuals from the guild, but you also invite individuals that cater, businesses that cater to the hops organizations. When you educate, you're just not educating on just the hops itself, but you're also giving opportunities for other businesses to talk about their specialty when it comes to the hops.
Correct. We've had brewers, which are the buyers, speak to our growers and be exhibitors at our trade shows because they can talk to the farmers exactly what they need for a product. We've had chemical companies come in that provide the chemicals, both organic and non-organic, for control of the pests and diseases. They have spoke. So we are a partnership with industry, with the brewers, with the growers, with the universities throughout the nation. I'm a member of the Great Lakes Hops Working Group, which we have members, researchers like myself from all over the U.S. as well as Canada. And we get together once a month just to share ideas. And we've had several of those folks in to speak at our conferences before. So yes, it is a group effort to be a successful hop producer. And there's plenty of resources. Nobody needs to do this on their own. Everybody has plenty of good people that are willing to help. And I'm so fortunate to have such a great group of folks that I work with here in Ohio that have helped grow this hop industry.
And I know that many individuals, when they're getting into the hops, the very first thing that they learn is that, again, it takes 3 years to get a decent crop.
Yes, correct. We can get a baby crop the first couple of years, but it is 3. So you'll have to have your banker convinced they're not going to get a big payment on that loan until you get that first big crop in 3 years.
And the other thing is to make sure that you have a really good water supply.
Exactly. And we'll probably go a little bit more in depth with that also in future programs, is the irrigation. If you don't have irrigation on your farm, you better not, or you can't develop an irrigation system, you probably better not grow hops.
Brad, I learned a great deal about different hops, what to get into when it comes to specialty crops. I think after watching your video on hops, that probably this isn't for a weekend farmer.
No. During the week is probably when the jobs are going to have to get done. So if you're only farming on weekends, more than likely you're going to miss the boat. So if you have a job that you can work at night or check it out in the evening, watch your fields, yes, it can be done. We have several people that are teachers and have other jobs and also are hop farmers, but you have to have a lifestyle that will allow you to complete those tasks in a timely manner.
During the winter months, does a very cold season affect the plants, or are they dormant during the winter months?
The hops do go dormant, just like all perennials, and we have not seen, even though we've had some pretty bad below 20 degrees, minus 20 degree temperatures since we've been growing hops, we have never seen winter injury. We do see some winter injury if that plant is planted late in the season and the root system is not established to hold it in place, and we get heaving from the freezing and the thawing of the soil. Sometimes those plants can get heaved out of the ground, but other than that, they survive our Ohio winters very well.
Hey, we're talking with Brad Bergefurd. Brad Bergefurd is a horticulture specialist, and he's an extension educator with the Ohio State University South Centers. We want to emphasize the different programs that are available. And for those individuals interested in really getting some hands-on kind of programs, Brad's going to be listing out the different training programs that you as an individual can attend. Brad, thank you very much.
Thank you, Patrick. See you next week.